Hello. It's the 10th of November, 2017, and this is episode 83 of the Unseen Podcast. This is your host, Paul Carr, and joining us in this session are James Garrison.
Howdy, everybody.
Patrick Festa.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Nick Nielsen. And Nick, we have lost. Okay. We'll get him back shortly. Oh, he's gone up to do something, to answer his phone. He'll be back soon. All right. Tonight, we have the as we always have, we have a pre-show discussion, and usually in that discussion we spend a fair bit of effort hashing out what topic we want to go over for the show. And everybody who wants to be on the panel needs to participate in that discussion. And I have with me the three people that did so. Let's start with you, Patrick. What were we talking about in that discussion?
We were hashing over what early education or education in general. And the topic that I had brought up was something basic, was the idea that education starts at home in small children. And that most people, when they hear that education starts at home, they get insulted and they think that, they have to sit there and teach their kids all kinds of technical tricks and stuff like that. But I said, no, it's not about that. It's about interaction with the kid. And I brought up the simple example of Christmas time. If your child gets a game for Christmas, for example, most of the time these things have to be pre-assembled, some assembly required, kind of thing. I happen to know a young child who got a game like that and ripped it out of the box and ran off with it, and all the stickers and things like that weren't on there. And his father didn't care about this. So I ran into the box and pulled out the assembly required stuff and showed the child, let's do this right. That sounds like something silly and simple, and some people don't realize that just doing the proper thing, the pre-assembly with the kid to show them how it's done properly, is how education starts in the home. And that again, that's my best example. There's a million other examples more technical than that, but that's actually very important, that you show small children the proper way to do things right from scratch.
Well, what if that proper way to do things is way too complicated for a small child to get a handle on?
Well, I mean, at least teach them, don't run away with the game before you put it together, kind of thing. If there's pre-assembly required, just going through the motions, even if you're doing it yourself. That's of course, that's just one example. I mean, there's a million other things. There's a lot of toys that are educational assembly in themselves, like even just blocks and things like that, Legos and things like that. These things are made to be assembled, but teaching a kid how to take care of this stuff, don't throw them all over the place.
They throw them all over the place. Yeah.
Make them pick it up so that they can play with them again tomorrow.
Yeah.
These are just basic examples, but it gets more technical than that. But the idea that the education starts at home doesn't mean that you sit down with the kid and show them how to do math and science and things like that, even if you don't know it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I should point out that, as every parent knows, that it's a child's job to leave Legos where the parents are going to be stepping barefooted.
Yep.
We're always delighted by how our children come up with creative things with Legos, but it's really an evil plan to make us suffer.
I can vouch to that one.
Yeah, I mean, when my son was 7, he put together a 17+ Lego kit by himself, pretty much, in about a day. So, I was so proud of him, but I knew I was going to pay for it.
Yeah, Colin's got my oldest, he's just turned 8 a while back, but he's got 2 pretty good sized bins full of Legos, and he builds some of the weirdest and frankly most frightening things I think I've ever seen out of those. And he'll look at you and go, "Oh, this is so I can throw the guys over the fence." So yeah, now he's wanting to build a full-scale trebuchet.
But and Colin is a friend of the show, so we're
Mm-hmm.
we're pro Colin here. Yeah, Colin, make sure you leave a few of those right where your dad will be stepping at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, no, it's the 2-year-old that frightens me. He's a little more aimed towards destruction than Colin ever was.
Legos are awesome. I mean, Legos and things like toys like that, where the kids I'm going to sit you in this room, and here's a bunch of things that fit together. You figure out what to do with them. That can be terrific. And
oh yeah.
By the way,
he doesn't follow the directions.
Oh, you don't have to follow the directions. Yeah. I mean, if you're into that, fine. If you're not, fine.
No, I mean, when you're talking about Legos, you're talking about it's a toy designed to be creative. There is no actual instructions except.
Well, no, some of the kits have very elaborate instructions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you want to build a specific item in the thing, you follow the instructions. But obviously, you want to try to build something else of your own creation.
It makes IKEA look lame. It's some of the instructions are really, really involved,
and some of them have pieces that are specifically for just like the TIE fighter.
Yeah,
they've got the window and the wing and the solar sails, and everything is designed specifically for the TIE fighter. It doesn't go for other sets, and yet like Colin has gotten to where he's made helicopters out of them and things like that.
Oh yeah, good for him.
Excellent.
Excellent. It's perfectly right to just diverge and do your thing, right? But now the problem a lot of us get criticized for is parking our children in front of screens instead of giving them creative toys. But as every parent knows, there's a certain once your kid sees the screen, your kid is going to want the screen. And so short of locking them away from the 21st century in an Amish farmhouse, they're gonna see the screens and they're gonna want the screens. They're gonna be screaming for the SpongeBob and whatever else. And
screens can be creative too with things like Minecraft, which everybody talks about these days.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Minecraft. Both of my kids have been into Minecraft at various times, and spent many, many hours with it. And I think it is really good. It is very creative. In fact, I'm not sold on the notion that all video games are bad for kids. I think a lot of them, and the research seems to be pretty ambiguous about it. But here we have in front of us right now a very high achieving and low violence generation that is doing good things, and they grew up with screens in front of their face, pretty much from the time they woke up to the time they went to bed. I mean, there may have been some, there were a few hours of, swinging swinging in the park, walks, playing with animals and whatever. But there were still, the screens were there almost every day, and and they have not, we're not looking at a generation of kids who are massively dysfunctional, and so I question the conventional wisdom that we're doing the wrong thing by not locking them in an Amish farmhouse and saying no screens ever.
Whose conventional wisdom is that?
Well, I hear that a lot. The kids have to be off screens and onto,
Right. Okay. Just the
out,
sort of thing
out in the woods and getting dirty and so forth. Which I am all for going out in the woods and getting dirty, but I don't think it's an either or.
Yeah, you can't be either or. You have to be a functional part of society. Another
functional part of Bikini Bottom anyway.
Another pet peeve of mine is parents don't always, I'm not saying that they're bad parents, but parents don't always recognize their kids' interests. Sometimes, I'm actually one of those kids that I had parents who could care less of what I was interested in. I was that 10-year-old kid who used to go to the library and pick up every astronomy book I can get my hands on. And my parents looked at me and just said, okay, they didn't interact, they didn't, because they weren't interested in the subject at all. They didn't ask me anything about it. They didn't say, even to say, what are you interested in there, or to even look at the books with me. They just sort of let me do my thing.
Because that public institution of the library was available for you to use.
Right. And I mean, there was no making fun of it about it or anything like that. But the lack of interaction, the lack of taking interest in what your child is interested in, sometimes is I never succeeded in it. I learned a bit about astronomy, and I'm a 58-year-old man now who's barely an amateur astronomer. All well and good, but if I felt that if my siblings and my parents would have taken interest into, like, wow, this kid's really into this. He's only 10 years old. Look what he's reading. I might have gone further. I might have gotten, encouraged. There was no encouragement, in other words. I was just doing it on my own.
Well, trying to keep up with the kids' interest too, because it goes from, like, Riley loves dinosaurs and sticking anything he can into any face hole he's got. And then Colin, it's right now, it's Pokemon, and he loves podcasting, and it'll flip-flop between that and then going out and doing archery just to target shoot. He never wants to hunt. He just wants to get better at shooting a bow, and helping me work with livestock. And then we both started playing Magic. So his interests change week to week, just kind of depending on which way the coin flips.
And that's totally normal for a kid his age. And
I mean, I'm not saying that you have to, like, dive in and but you did take interest. You're interacting, and there's no wrong and right way, but not to do it at all is a wrong thing.
Yeah. And as James just pointed out, your kids' interests will change a lot, and it's probably not what they'll be most interested in when they're adults. But I'm one of those rare exceptions. But I was a Sputnik baby, born in a few months after Sputnik went up, and I was interested in space, and I've never been really much interested in much else since then. Well, I shouldn't say. There's lots of things that interest me, but not many that I really want to apply myself enough to become professional at. And that's totally fine that kids change their interests all the time. My son went through 3 periods as a young boy when he was incredibly interested in tornadoes and severe weather, and 2 periods where his main thing was reptiles. And he might very well end up doing one of those things for a living, but or it doesn't really matter to me. The fact that he was,
it doesn't matter, whichever one he ends up with, or
it'd probably be something else altogether. That's fine.
The fact that you sat with him and took interest in what he was interested in, even if it was just a 2-day thing, it
was more like a 2-year thing for him.
Well, okay, that's better yet. But the thing is, it's a development. It's a brain development thing,
Yeah, well, I mean, we bought every accessible, readable reptile book on the market in the English language for a while there. We had them all, and we also had every book that anybody could find on, extreme weather, especially tornadoes, and every video, and and that was for me a wonderful thing about being a parent. It was, my kid is so interested in this stuff. And, I learned a lot about tornadoes that I didn't know, but that, of course, that's not going to be his profession, or maybe who knows, who cares, right? But his fascination, it's his fascination. It's that feeling of, this is fascinating, that you want to really latch onto, right?
Yeah.
That sense of wonder. Now, I have not been able to get either of my kids into astronomy. I've tried and tried. I would go out and say, look there's the moon, or, look at that constellation. Who knows what that constellation is? And it's like, Dad, just shut up.
I'll send you a video of Riley yelling about his moon.
Well, good for Riley.
No, he just points up, and if anybody else points at him, he goes, "No, mine." So, but
well,
I mean, the part I was going to say, part of being a parent though is also walking the fine line of taking an interest in what your kids are doing, and also letting them develop their interests on their own too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Well, now here's the thing: when a kid asks you a difficult science question, like, why does the moon change shape over the month, or why is the sky blue? The thing to do is not say, oh, well, the sky's blue because the upper atmosphere scatters blue light preferentially because of oxygen. No, because first of all, they won't understand it. Second, that's not the whole point, right? The point is to get them to think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when a kid asks you, why is the sky blue? Your response should be, well, why do you think the sky is blue? Right? And
or
they're going to be wrong in their answer. It doesn't matter. It does not matter at all that they are wrong. Right?
But it's getting them to think about it.
I kind of agree, but there's some line crossing there. In other words, you want them to have the right answer, but maybe you want to make him look it up for himself. See if he's right.
Well, you ask him.
No, I don't want to look it up. I just want to think about it. I don't care if he looks it up or not. I mean, when he's older, yeah, he's going to look it up. And
then part of what we do is we do something similar, Paul, and then afterwards we'll go, okay, well, let's check. We'll find a YouTube video, or we'll find an article or something that's geared towards kids, and we'll look at it, and then Colin will go, okay, well, I can see where I was wrong. And on a few of these things, he's taking an interest. Others, as soon as he gets the answer to it, he never thinks about it again.
Yeah, well, I've heard a couple of your 5 minutes with Colin, or it turned out to be more like 20 minutes of Colin, but
it turned into 15, 20.
Yeah. But, it starts out with Colin saying, well, I think you talked about some things like aliens. It was so funny.
Well,
why do you think they're alien? Well, because it's in this comic book I read or something.
The thing not to do, the really wrong thing to do is to give them some non-realistic answer. So again, I was always the small child that was interested in science of many types. So we were speaking of weather, thunder and lightning. And I barely remember this. I was just starting to talk, I guess, but I do remember asking one of my parents or somebody in the house, how does that, why is there thunder, or how does that, thunder happen, or something to that effect. And the stupid answer that I got made me go look it up for myself. Was God is bowling, or some stupid shit like that, and I'm like, okay, that's can't be the actual answer, so let me go find out why. And I found out, but again, it's a lot of things that parents do when they don't even want to care about the kid's interest. A simple question like, how come, how is thunder happening, or why is it lightning, or what that weather question. The thing not to do is to give some stupid answer because you don't really know, or you just don't want to bother.
Well, I got the angels are bowling answer when I was little, right? But my mother had this grin on her face like, I'm not serious. I don't really mean that true. I just don't know the answer. And so we all just sort of knew, okay, well, the angels are bowling.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's not really right, but
Yeah.
Mom doesn't know why there's thunder, so we'll find somebody else.
Yeah, well, I give that as stupid.
Well, I give a smart aleck response just to make Colin curious enough to know if I'm right or not.
Oh yeah, I lie to my kids all the time just to see if they can tell, right? Or like,
it's just. Well, I mean,
I only use it as an example. I mean, it may be okay to say that about the Angels bowling and stuff like that, but I just use it as an example of the lack of follow up.
Well, if I've told my son that it's the Angels are bowling, he would have just said, "Okay, Dad, you're obviously full of it."
Right.
Once again, and let's talk about why there really is thunder, and so
there was follow up.
Yeah. And I'd say, well, okay, what else happens at the same time as thunder, or almost the same time, or just a little bit before? And well, lightning. Yeah. Maybe they're related somehow. And think about that. And I don't want to give them the Wikipedia Encyclopedia Britannica answer, right? That is the worst. I think that's worse than telling them something false.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
because they're just going to say, okay, that was their accepted dogma. And now I know what it is. You don't want that. You want thought.
Right. I mean, I like I said, I only use it as an example. All of us kids had the questions to why you see the lightning before you hear the thunder. And you sooner or later learn that light travels much faster than sound and all that stuff. But I just use it as an example at how some parents can just dismiss it and just never even find out, never even follow up.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's obviously, it's a crime to dismiss your child's curiosity.
Right.
But not.
There are some. I know some people like that, though.
It's also a crime to pretend that you know what the answer is when you don't.
Right. That's
it's perfectly all right to say to your child, you know what? I don't know. I don't know why snakes shed their skin, or I don't know why tornadoes spin so hard. Maybe you and I should get a book at the library and look it up.
That's what I'm talking about. It's just taking interest and taking a few minutes out to show the kid that you're actually trying to find the answer, even if you don't know it yourself. That sort of thing. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
I do know some parents that don't even bother.
Yeah, I mean, and when they're a little older, they're going to have questions about their own bodies and relationships, that sort of thing. And you got to, it's the same attitude. You got to get them thinking about it. Don't just give them the dogmatic answer. Don't say, Jeebus wants you to get married before sex or something,
Right.
Say, what do you think is the right answer and why? Or they may say, oh, I noticed that at my school, there's these two girls who seem to be in love. Isn't that weird? And you can say, well, maybe not so weird. Maybe they really are in love, and maybe that's none of our business. Maybe two people of the same gender can be in love, and why would you not want people to love each other? And rather than saying, oh well, that's unnatural, son.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
But long before that question gets asked, the child will have spent many, many years in a home where you get accustomed to the kind of things that is accepted as a legitimate answer or a form of inquiry, or there's a lot of different ways of thinking about things. So it's not just good enough to point the way to think things through for themselves, which is, of course, an admirable thing that parents should do if they are able to. But it's also guiding people, not just children, anybody you meet, toward constructive forms of inquiry that are going to have some kind of relevance for the world in which we live.
Yeah,
I
and you
always
know,
love the way Nick articulates the.
Have any of you seen the Primitive Technology YouTube channel?
no.
It's a young man who goes out into a forested area. He doesn't say a word, but he from nothing. He doesn't even take a knife or an axe with him. He makes an axe out of a chipped rock, and then he cuts down trees. He makes a hut. He makes a blast furnace. He makes all this kind of stuff literally from the ground up. Rather than even bringing a container for water, he digs clay out and fires the clay and makes a jug in which he can bring water from the stream to make mud bricks. So this is somebody who is getting an understanding of how things are constructed and how technology evolves really from the ground up. I mean, going from absolutely nothing to being able to create a simple blast furnace where you can start smelting metals. And if everybody had the time to do that, or parents had the time to do that with their children, or if ignorant people could be gotten to do that with knowledgeable people, you would see that the kind of things the scientists say aren't just arbitrary stuff that just pulled out of their hat. That there's a long history, but our traditions of knowledge are so old now, thousands of years old, that very few people have any idea how we come to know the things that we know. And very few people have the time, because technical education is so long-winded these days. It takes years of university study to be able to do something competent, something difficult with competence, that few people have the extra time to even know how that competence came about and how that knowledge developed. But ultimately, if we're ever going to have a scientific civilization and the people who are worthy for a scientific civilization, people have to understand that this stuff isn't just arbitrary stuff that somebody made up on a boring day, but that there's a long history, and this knowledge was painfully acquired from the labor of many generations.
Yes, and even people with university educations in complex subjects don't know in detail how that knowledge came about unless they take the initiative to study it themselves. I've been recently listening to a Chad Davies podcast, The Scientific Odyssey, which I highly recommend. And what Chad Davies is a physicist from Georgia who teaches a lot of undergraduate physics courses, but he in his podcast, he goes into incredible detail about the exact history of how certain ideas and scientific concepts came to be, and looking not only at the science but also at the people that developed the science. And it is a lot of stuff I did not know, even though it's all science I know. I didn't know a lot of the details of how these people, really suffered for their science and worked hard and had to overcome barriers, and often, just after many, and a lot of the best scientific ideas did not come about from a single moment of aha, but many years of studying data really, really hard. And but you don't get that as a university education. You get, okay, here's the accepted answer to this question, and let's move on. Here's the equations you need to know. Okay, for tonight's homework, I want you to calculate this, this, and this. And you go and do that because you're a dutiful student, but you don't know where a lot of that came from. And in fact, there's a lot of PhD physicists and astronomers who don't know a whole lot about the history of their field. They know the current state of the art, which is an awful lot of work right there. And that's pretty much all they know.
And if you were to decide, I'm going to go to university now and I'm going to start learning cosmology, you would find yourself immediately injected into very sophisticated debates over dark matter, dark energy, how these experiments intended to find these or refute the theories, how you might come. And you're not going to get the background of how people got to that moment of, the incredibly complex present moment of everything that's going on. So you focus on what you have to focus on to learn, that. But at some point, if you're really going to understand things from the ground up, you've got to figure out how people know the things they know, and or why they think they know.
Well, I mean, even modern cosmology has a very complex history, and cosmology before the 20th century, before Einstein, has a really, as you know, a very long, complex history, and if you're a graduate student trying to get your handle on dark energy, you're probably not thinking about that very much. You're thinking about what's the current data, what's the current literature, right. what are the models, and then I'm running my models 18 hours a day.
And how can I design a better experiment so I might either prove or disprove?
Yeah, and just writing an observational proposal will wear out the most seasoned of astronomy veterans, So it's partly that we have to specialize to get really, really good at the things we do. And there are some people who can, like Chad Davies, who can back up and say, wait, how did we get to this point? And sometimes it takes somebody who's not a specialist, somebody like, say, Davies, who wrote this book, The Glass Universe, which explains how those ladies working at Harvard University came to understanding of how the universe is structured, that it was vastly more sophisticated than anything we had in the 19th century. So there's a lot there that we just don't get, we don't have. And you can be a published, sophisticated scientist in a field and not know much about the history at all. You don't even know how you know what you know.
And that's something that science education and science communications has to grapple with, instead of just throwing people into the midst of a very sophisticated context of knowledge without having any clue. Because throwing people into this context, as you implied earlier, implies a certain dogmatism, and then you get this really rigid intellectual community where it's not okay to question the assumptions. Just earlier today, I was reading an article, I think it was by Alexandra Witz on the dark energy search, because two dark energy searches, one done in China and one done somewhere else, just came up zip with their efforts to find WIMPs, the weekly interactive
dark matter searches, not dark energy.
Yeah. What did I say? Did I just say dark energy? Yeah, I meant dark matter searches.
Yeah.
So the attempt to find WIMPs, weakly interactive massive particles, have come up nil. So they're still going to probably build another generation of machines at higher energy to do another test. But I think people are starting to now look a little more favorably on the outlandish and whack job theories that have been neglected for several decades, while the more conventional ways through the standard model were being pursued. But of course, there's a very good reason to pursue the standard model, because this has been refined over several decades, and it represents a lifetime work of hundreds, if not thousands, of physicists.
Yeah, and it's made incredibly successful predictions. So
right. So you have to be able to appreciate that at the same time as being able to appreciate that there are alternative formulations, and that we aren't necessarily going to get the answers by exclusively following the model that has the greatest acclaim at the present moment in history.
Right. Well, I look at dark matter as a blessing. The universe has blessed us with this puzzle that we can't solve, and we have it means that we know our knowledge is incomplete, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's the same thing with anomalies, like the repeating the exploding supernova that was just discussed this past week.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that turns out to be a real anomaly. I really do. It's early days yet, but the I don't want to ever get in a situation where we were with Lord Kelvin in the late 19th century, where we pretty much have it all figured out except for a couple little things. Well, those couple little things that we didn't have figured out turned out to be to blow the lid off of physics. And George Gamow's book, by the way, that was it 30 Years That Shook Physics, is a great book. But Gamow was a great physicist too. So there are we tend to get I think we've learned that lesson, and everybody's saying, yeah, the Standard Model is this massive achievement that explains everything we can do with a particle accelerator that we know about, but we know we don't have complete knowledge yet. We know we're not done, and so because we have wonderful things like dark matter that defy measurement, and so that's a good thing, and that means the next generation of scientists that are being born this year are going to have real puzzles to work on that may have actually involved paradigm shifts, not possibly tossing out major components of the old theories, or maybe a lot of the components of the old theories, and rebuilding them to something new. And that's great.
One could even design a curriculum leaping from anomaly to anomaly through the history of science, rather than focusing on successful theory to successful theory. Go from emergent anomaly to emergent anomaly, which is sort of what James Burke did in his 1980s television series, The Day the Universe Changed, which I watched when it was new on PBS, and I enjoy, and I own on DVD now, by the way.
Yeah.
He goes, say again?
The Day the Universe Changed?
The Day the Universe Changed.
Oh, James Burke, yeah.
Yeah. It is very much influenced by Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. In fact, there's a very funny moment. Before Burke did The Day the Universe Changed, he did a series of 3 different series called Connections, which is also excellent material. He works out the long, painful emergence of particular ideas and technologies. But it's apparently before he read the book Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which focuses on paradigm shifts. That's the source of the term paradigm shift, is Kuhn's book on Structure of Scientific Revolutions. But the Connections is pretty much completely innocent of that idea. But The Day the Universe Changed is almost completely constructed around the idea of a paradigm shift, because a paradigm shift is the day the universe changes, when you go from looking at the world in one way to looking at the world in another way. And I think in one of on each episode of The Day the Universe Changed, he finishes with a little dialogue with another guy, and they talk about some of the overarching ideas that are involved in the series, and they hit upon this in one of these.
Yeah, it's rarely a day, though. It's usually more like
20
or 30 years.
On TV or paid?
Oh, that was a long time ago. It was on BBC, wasn't it?
No, well, I don't know. I think it was financed by PBS in the United States. It came out as a Nova, I think.
Oh, okay. You might be right.
It is. You can buy it, but it's expensive. But it's almost certainly available, like everything else, on YouTube. I haven't checked.
I think they still occasionally show it.
Probably. There's so many TV channels these days, but.
Well, I mean, our PBS station still shows it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little dated, but it's a great series to get across this idea of paradigm shifts in the history of knowledge.
Yeah, and paradigm shifts. There's a lot of really well-known examples of that, but some I don't know if that's the right mental lens for everything that happens, but it certainly there have been I think there have been identifiable paradigm shifts, but
right, it's not necessarily the universal explanation. There's a lot of stuff that seems very cumulative over time. And I have met many people in my life who have a who are very sympathetic to really marginal theories, and they always think, well, there's something that's going to be proved soon, and everything's going to be different. We just have to throw away everything that was said by Einstein, or throw away everything that was said by. And I always tell them, well, even if somebody comes up with a new theory, not only is it going to have to describe observations that aren't explained by the old theories, it's also going to have to explain all of those observations that have been perfectly well described by quantum theory and by general relativity.
So that's the catch.
You don't get to abandon those observations. Right. They're still there. They're still valid.
Yeah, you need stupidity.
You need to do better.
No. These people aren't stupid, Patrick. They're just deluded.
I mean, there's a certain stupidity in that kind of attitude where, oh yeah, Einstein must have been wrong, and everything he did is wrong. No, you can't. It's not wrong. You wouldn't be.
Well, no, I mean, it could be wrong. I mean, but to show that it's wrong, you have to do the incredibly hard work of coming up with a theory that explains everything else that came before, as well as make some new predictions. And
people don't realize they're using a computer, for example, and they don't realize that if E did not equal MC squared, the computer wouldn't even be working.
Well, no, it would. But I mean,
not if it uses GPS,
you don't need special relativity to design a computer. But the reality is that I come across this too a lot. People say Einstein was wrong, and I go, okay, fine, all right. We have all these data that show why Einstein was right. Explain all of those things, and then in a reproducible, consistent, mathematically consistent way, and then make a prediction that Einstein couldn't have made. Right. And then we can talk. and a lot of people don't even realize that things like very basic things like the fact that certain muons that are striking the Earth's, the detectors on the Earth's surface at a much higher rate than they should be, because in we send the balloons out, the balloons detect the muons, we realize where they're created in the atmosphere when the cosmic rays hit them, and they shouldn't hit. They should decay before they hit the surface of the Earth, and they don't because of time dilation, which is something Einstein predicted. Very simple things like that, and the fact that every particle accelerator ever built has built in the assumptions of special relativity, and there's not a single anomaly there to.
Well, it's kind of like like Newton and Einstein, right? Just because Einstein found better answers doesn't negate the laws of motion.
Well, no, it doesn't negate them. It just means that they're a close approximation to.
Well, I gave that. I thought it was a good example, but some people actually think that forget about everything Newton said. Like no.
Oh no. You still have to teach what Newton said. You just have to. You just have to, because. Let's face it, 99.9% of the mechanical analysis that we do in this civilization is done with Newton's laws.
Right. I mean, that's what I mean.
Every engineer knows F equals MA and can use that his entire career without any deviation. And it's only when you get into extreme examples that you need relativity.
And like the perihelion of Mercury.
Yeah, or GPS.
Yeah, GPS.
I should have said the precession of Mercury. I said
it's the advance of the perihelion of Mercury is very slightly off from what classical mechanics predicts, and it's very impressive that they knew that in the early 20th century, even actually before that. But and things like that. The bending of starlight by the sun during eclipses that can be observed.
Yeah, well, the whole classical physics period leading up to the ether experiments, that's a very impressive accomplishment. Like you said, it's amazing when you read about the apparatus that was constructed to test for the ether interference, the first interferometer, as it were.
Michelson-Morley
amazing.
experiment, yeah.
Yeah, the Michelson-Morley experiment. What they were able to attain in the 19th century, they had to insulate the apparatus from horse hooves hitting the pavement outside because there were no cars yet at that time.
Oh yeah, they had it was an amazing bit of engineering. I'm in awe.
And that's part of the history of science that you don't learn if you just stumble into contemporary debates and you don't know about this whole background of how the contemporary.
Einstein always said he never knew what the Michelson-Morley experiment, though. It was it's not clear that was true, but that's what he used to say. But he was more Maxwell's equations that inspired him to establish the speed of light as a universal constant. But yeah, I mean, they did this fantastic experiment because everybody in the 19th century believed in the ether. The ether was a dogma that almost was unchallengeable in the 1870s, 1880s. And Maxwell could not find the ether in his equations, and that led him to doubt them. And although, there was...
And led others to search for them.
and there was no evidence of ether found, ever. Which is an interesting case. I think somebody should really dig into that and figure out, why did we really believe? Why did so many sophisticated, smart scientists believe in the ether?
Because they believed that there had to be some medium in which the wave.
Well, yeah,
electromagnetic radiation
I've heard that
propagated.
too. But it's a complicated. These are not simple-minded people.
No, but at the same time, they were using the ether like we today use dark matter and dark energy. It's just a cipher for what you don't know, okay? Instead of saying, this is the great unknown of physics, we say, this is dark matter. Or instead of saying in the 19th century and saying, this is the great unknown of physics, you say, this is the ether.
Yeah, well, the thing is,
leave it for somebody else
when you solve, they had, before Maxwell, there was the wave equation. And the wave equation described waves in a medium like a string or a drum head or whatever, physical medium. And then Maxwell runs his equations not very far down the road, and he finds a wave equation, exactly the same form but it doesn't require a medium. It just these fields moving back and forth, and it doesn't make sense that there's not a physical medium there. But reality is that there was never any theoretical requirement for one. And so there was this dogma that electromagnetic waves, like any other kind of wave, because there was a lot of evidence that light was a wave, moves. It's got to be through some medium.
Well, I think that besides the fact that it was a long time ago, humans or any animal for that matter, you see what's around you. You're living in this physical world, and most of them went swimming, and they understand that the waves travel through water, and it's just embedded into you, and it just wasn't apparent to them at the time that it could be possible. So I guess that can create a dogma of sorts.
Yeah. Well, our evolutionary psychology is shaped by macroscopic phenomenon and not by quantum level phenomenon, and not by phenomenon that are described by general relativity.
Right. You can't see it, then it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, you could certainly see. It's very easy to see wave-like behavior in light, right? Very easy. You put a couple of very thin slits in front of a light source, and you'll see that.
Right.
And or these days we use a or even in Newton's time they had prisms, and the prism was a wonderful demonstration of the wave-like nature of light. And now we have diffraction gratings, which are exquisitely precise, But the diffraction grating is really no different from a double slit. It's just lots more slits, and you can get this very beautiful wave-like behavior that you at some point, I think in the 19th century, thought, well, we understand light. It is a wave, and it must be moving through some kind of medium like all other waves. But the reality was they never had that. And so they developed this dogma, and it took kind of a complicated intersection of experiment and theory to blow that dogma away, and eventually it cleared away. And then when it was gone, you had this amazing new physics. But it took probably 30 years? I don't know. I mean, yes, Einstein's paper in 1905 was decisive, but it wasn't the only thing that had to happen. There was more. And
well, I mean, it amazes me how they even knew this stuff 200, 300, and 400 years ago to begin with.
Well, they didn't know it not 300, 400 years ago, but
I mean,
in the 17th century, Newton wrote a lot about light, and that, to a certain extent, Newton became like a god to some people, even though a lot of his stuff was really opaque and required a lot of interpretation. He became this. If Newton said it was true, it was true.
Well, I think
as Alexander Pope said, God said, "Let Newton be," and all was light.
Yeah.
Well, Newton was incredibly insightful, but
Newton was an incredibly smart human being. I mean,
he was a monster.
I mean, they say Einstein was the smartest person. I'm not so sure. Just because he figured out, his relativity and how the universe works and everything, doesn't make him any smarter than the person hundreds of years before him, because they didn't know the things that we know now because of him in the first place. You know what I'm saying? In order to figure this stuff out in the first place, you have to be incredibly...
you have to stand on the shoulder of giants.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And
we can extrapolate this process backward through our history and come to the earliest people who made stone tools and bone needles as pretty damn clever people.
They were. Absolutely. Our deep history ancestors were very clever. And we'll never really know exactly how clever, because we only have traces of them. But it's just like we don't even know how clever the ancient Greeks were, because nearly all of that information is lost.
Well, we have books from them at least, so we have preserved the language.
But I think something like 1% of everything they wrote. We still
a lot has been lost. However,
the Library of Alexandria only
if we were to take a DNA sample from an early human ancestor and regrow that from scratch, and then give that individual an intelligence test, then there potentially, I'm not saying this is an ethical experiment, but there is an experiment that could answer that question.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that there have been a lot of genetic changes over the years, and that have affected cognition, but given the challenges that our ancestors had in their environment, they answered them with a lot of intellectual acuity, which we should admire. Even if it was just a better spearhead or a better way to hunt elk, it was their challenge that they faced. And they also, it's very clear that around 40,000 years ago in Europe, there was this revolution in abstract thought. We see that on the cave walls, that there was this, that the rendering of these very beautiful renderings of animals they contain a certain amount of abstraction.
That's sometimes called cognitive modernity, as it distinguished from anatomical modernity.
Or what I think it's been called the Great Leap Forward by some people.
Don't forget about the environmental challenges for today. For example, who cares about astronomy nowadays? It's because we live in brightly lit cities. You can't see the sky. Could you imagine how beautiful it must have been without electric lights? The sky, in other words, you can't help but look up and say, "Oh my God, what the hell?"
Yeah,
you
very
can't help
true.
but be fascinated by that, even if you were the dumbest kid in the 17th century or something. You couldn't get away from the fact that the sky is full of stars that are moving before you.
Well,
Couldn't get away from it.
every star that you and I could see was named thousands of years ago,
Right.
and
I mean, some of them
either by the Arabs or the
had their own
Greeks.
idea. The Chinese gave us some of the best star maps, even though if they used it for something that wasn't actually science. But the point is that, this is an environmental thing. And then there's the negative environmental effects of the poisons that we have in our air and our, water and stuff like, look at lead poisoning, generations must have been even slightly poisoned by my generations of living in homes with lead paint and stuff like that, So there's a lot of
well, I mean,
pluses and minuses.
my ambition,
even if we genetically grew our brains, it doesn't necessarily mean we're smarter.
My ambition in retirement is to buy a house way out in the outer Jabip where I can have dark skies, and I don't care much about much else. Even if the internet is too slow, if I have dark skies, I'm good. And that is, yes, certainly people who lived thousands of years ago, many of them lived who lived, say, in the Middle East, could go out on a typical night and see a lot of stars that we can't see. I live in the DC suburbs right now, where you're lucky on a good night if you can see a few hundred stars.
Yeah.
Probably you could, in a really good dark location, you can see thousands of stars with the naked eye.
Right. You can see the Andromeda Galaxy with the naked eye if you're in a dark enough place.
I've seen that a few times, but
once.
Not where I live here.
No, I've seen it once, and it was High Point, New Jersey, the highest point in New Jersey.
The first time I saw it in depth was on a dark night in Iowa, but a long way from any major towns or cities. And then the best I ever saw was on Mount Palomar, actually, which is not that far from San Diego, but high enough up that you can get above most of the light pollution. Mount Palomar is exquisite skies, but it's not the best. They're better.
Yeah, well, the darkest place on Earth is somewhere in the middle of is it the Atlantic Ocean or is it the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah, but you want to be underneath. You don't want to be underneath all that moist air. You want to. Better to be in Hawaii, like a Mauna Kea, where.
That's on my bucket list. Before I die, I want to go to some observatory.
Cerro Tololo,
other than the one that I was a part
Chile.
of.
In Chile has. Brian Coberline recently tried to go up to that observatory, and one of the observatories in Chile, and he couldn't make it because the altitude was so high that he couldn't go. But yeah, I mean, you get up around 14,000 feet, most people are gonna be hurting.
Well, yeah, they got the people that work there have to regularly breathe oxygen.
Yeah, it's not easy. And even if you're in good shape, it's not easy. So, an old fart like me is gonna probably not.
Well, even if I was to get out there and make it halfway up, just to look at the dark sky that's halfway up.
Yeah. Well, I'd recommend going to the Southwest.
You can acclimatize to that. You just have to take the time for it.
I would recommend going to the Southwest, like say Arizona or New Mexico. And just going. I mean, I've seen some really nice skies in New Mexico, just not very far off the road. And almost everything in New Mexico is like 6,000 feet altitude, and just go to New Mexico, go to Albuquerque, have a good time in Albuquerque, then drive like 100 miles away to Las Cruces, and not even 100 miles, 50 miles, and enjoy the night skies. Get a campsite out there and just hang out. It's not that expensive.
Right now I'm kind of a prisoner. But it'll happen one day.
Yeah, well, I recommend it. The Southwest is so beautiful. Anyway, we're talking about education. Let's get back to our kids. Have we got James back yet?
Yeah,
I can see him there. James, can you hear him?
Yeah. Yeah, I just
It's a stroke of 11:30, by the way. Okay, Jay. Let's talk a little bit more about. The point is, as usual on this podcast, we wander all over the place, which is fine. Yeah. I don't object to that. Let's talk about. Let's say, okay, we're going to put James Garrison in as the King of the United States. Which is probably a really bad, a really bad idea.
Yeah.
But, okay. What does James Garrison's do about it? What are your first commands about education?
One, standardized tests really don't do much good because, they're kind of geared towards a certain cultural and socioeconomic position. So people from like non-English speakers or people who are not native to this country, who haven't grown up in the culture, are going to have a harder time with a lot of the standardized tests. I've never been fond of them. I don't just, a little behind the scenes, I actually do have a bachelor's degree in education. Granted, it's ag ed, but it's still, I was trained as a teacher. I have no problem with the concept of sending kids to trade schools, almost kind of like the old apprenticeship programs. Anybody who doesn't have an aptitude for some sort of an academic area, anybody who's looking at more of any kid that I think that kids, instead of, just feeling like all they can do is work at McDonald's if they don't get to go to, a college, if you send them to a trade school to where they can learn a technical skill, computer repair, website, especially with the new years, everything's going to be digital anyway. So if kids can get on board and learn, computer repair, website design, coding, things like that, and become very proficient in it, they're probably going to be more adept in the future marketplace than any of the four of us are. So, and then the flip side is to, given that ideal in agriculture, people like to eat. And the thing is, you have a lot of people coming up that are, you need to have workers on farms, and they need to be more technologically advanced now than ever. So any discipline that somebody might think about going into, you need to have a technological edge. So if they're not going to go to college, a trade school, and do the same thing, offer grants and loans and
I know a lot of people that
get into education,
fall into the cracks, right? They have incredible talent, but they hate the idea, even the idea of going to college. College just bores the hell out of them. And then college is just not their scene at all. But they're way too smart to be just like learning auto mechanics or welding. So, a lot of people are autodidacts. They teach themselves.
Yeah, that's hard.
And the thing is, they can do a trade school could actually be, give them a founding on that.
Yeah, but that they're already. I've known people that are already know more than the instructors when they go into trade school.
Yeah. But there's a lot of kids. You look at interurban kids.
Yeah.
That don't have a means to. I did teach at a interurban school for a little bit, and a lot of those kids just automatically assumed that when they got out, they'd be working at a fast food or they'd be working, selling drugs. I mean, there was a few of them that were already gangbangers at 12 or 13. But if you could get them into a VOTEC early or get them into some sort of a, like I said earlier, an apprenticeship, get them into where they're actually into some sort of a career field that they're interested in. Because some of these kids were incredibly bright, but they just felt that, the system was holding them down. Yeah, even like you were talking about your friends, if you can get them into an apprenticeship type program into a field that they like, then they can learn, hands-on.
Yeah, a lot of it seems to me like we're telling these kids, many of who, like you noted, come from very challenging environments. Here's how you can fit into this mold that we've already made for you, rather than saying, oh, here's your amazing talent. Let's see how we can figure out a way to turn that into something that would be a happy life for you.
Yeah, that's why I was saying I didn't like the standardized tests, because they just force the kids to look at, okay, you fit within these columns here.
Yeah,
it's also a financial thing. I mean, the inability to actually attend any further school, like college or you have to pay for school, is impossible these days.
There's a lot of financial aid available for kids that come from poor families. It's not a perfect system, but
there's financial aid.
But that's how I got through school.
Yeah,
I mean, there is financial aid. Yes, I'm just saying that it is almost an extracurriculum thing to have to go get that financial aid. Sometimes.
Well, yeah, you have to go get it. Yeah, sure.
There's more, poor people in this world now. I'm one of them than there was, before then. And college just keeps getting more and more expensive.
Well, that is a reality. I mean, college costs have gone way, 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 way up beyond inflation.
I like Bernie Sanders' idea of making public schools beyond 12th grade.
Yeah, I'm as a parent right now. I have a junior in high school we're facing college. She's a good student. She could potentially go a lot of places. And right almost in our backyard is Johns Hopkins University. Very expensive, but certainly probably about as good an undergraduate education as you're going to find in the whole country. And, we're not poor, but we do face the issue of paying for, it's a big pile of cash you have to come up with every year to go to Johns Hopkins. And the question is that worth it versus maybe going to the University of Maryland, which is a pretty good school that is probably about a quarter of the cost. Admittedly, that's a good, easy problem. That's a good problem to have, having a child who's a good student and lots of
choices,
top class educational institutions. Yeah. I mean, my intuitive sense is we're going to end up in College Park, but there will be a lot of back and forth before that happens. But we're not going to get financial aid to go to Johns Hopkins, which is probably going to kill that whole idea. Besides, it's probably not the right place for her, but nevertheless, that's something I'm going through right now and I also ask myself, is my daughter going to college, maybe going to graduate school, is that going to be the happiest life for her? And sure, that's a decision ultimately she has to make, not me. But that's something that perplexes me a lot these days. I'm not sure that for a lot of young people, college is not the answer.
Right. It's a complex question.
But we still push it as like the
It's a complex problem. I was listening to a story on WB, and I mean NPR radio, a discussion with some doctors. These are smart people who became doctors and stuff, but some of them are in debt up to their ears for like the rest of their life because of their college education that cost.
Well, yeah, if you decide you want to be a doctor and then you decide to go into the family practice, which is where the most doctors are needed, you're going to make the least amount of money and take the longest to pay your loans off.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an example. I mean, it's so expensive. Again, that's why the recent political atmosphere was about education. And I remember when Bernie Sanders was talking about it, he was talking about how ridiculously expensive it is, and the possibility of making school beyond 12th grade. In fact, I think it was, what was it, 1950 something, where they turned public schools up to 12th grade or something like that. They expanded it once.
I don't know.
It was much lower at one time, and then they expanded it to 12th grade as a graduate of high school. And now he was considering doing it again for like 2 more years, like going to associate's degree or something like, like kind of like just making public schools, free to the public.
Community college
like
is
that.
free.
Yeah, community college idea.
Yeah, which they pretty much are now. I mean, community college
now
is
we got
super cheap.
Davies, who basically just wants to get rid of education altogether.
Oh, I don't even have a good word for it.
Yeah, let's not get it. Let's not go down to the Davies. That's too much slumming for me.
I'm sorry, I had to take my jab where I could.
No, I don't blame you.
Yeah,
you being
well,
the teacher that you are, I'm sure you probably understand.
You don't need jabs. You need a right cross that just
I could do
knocks him into the ropes.
I'll probably get a nice little knock on the door now tomorrow.
Okay, Mr. Garrison, we hear you've been threatening the Secretary of Education.
No, wasn't
FBI.
You challenged her to a boxing match.
No, that's good. Remember when I was trying to make a GoFundMe to have Trump as the first man on Mars?
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful idea.
We'll just tell him it needs a casino.
We need to check out the life support systems and find out what's wrong with them.
Just tell them there's breathable air.
Oh, damn, it didn't work this time. Well, maybe next time. Okay, yeah. Pence, get in the capsule.
Now we'll just send them to the sun at night.
That works every time.
Mm.
Okay, well, let me ask. I've already asked James what he would do if he were the. Holy crap! What happened here?
I'm still here.
I already asked James what he would do if he were the secretary.
You said king of the. You asked king of the country.
I asked you what you would do if you were king of the United States, which I really think that would, making anybody king of the United States is a bad idea.
I'm expecting a crown now.
But
well, it sounds familiar though. King
James. Go to Burger King. They've got one waiting for you there.
I'll tell them you sent me.
What if they mistake you for the hamburger instead?
No. The actual let me ask Nick Nielsen, what would you do if
do I get to be benevolent dictator instead? I want to be benevolent dictator of the planet entire. That's my title.
Okay, fine.
I agree strongly with what James said about trade school. I would even go farther, and I would say universities need to be way pared down to just the few people who have a really clearly academic and scholarly interest, and that most people should be put into trade schools. It takes, in our highly technical economy, it takes many years of mastering a skill to be really good at it, and people would need to focus on that through years of trade school, and not pretend that we've got this egalitarian society where even everybody gets their dose of the humanities and the arts, because a lot of this stuff is just really badly done, and now it's become very politicized as well. But I would, as benevolent dictator of the planet entire, I would always keep in mind, you've got to reach people where they're at. You can't, you've got to find people where their interests are. And I would encourage every person, young or old, to follow their interest and their passion insofar as there's any way to do it, even if it's impractical. We all know that everybody gets into college now as an insurance program against being poor, and it's really vocational education to get a good paying job. But this is not the best use of human capital, in my opinion. It's when people do what they're passionate about that they excel, and they do great things, and they do things that other people don't imagine. Some of people will accomplish that at trade school. Some people would accomplish that in a traditional university setting. Some people will accomplish it outside a university setting. Some people would find it in an apprenticeship program. Some people would find it reading at the library. So whatever it takes, I think there needs to be diverse social institutions, as long as those institutions are available and out there and open to people, which is arguably what Andrew Carnegie was behind in his, building libraries all over the United States. He got really, really rich, and he built. I've been to Carnegie libraries in Oregon. They say right over the facade that they were built as part of that Carnegie ambition to make libraries available all over the country. So I think I would like to see an initiative with whatever the modern equivalent of a library would be, maybe a makerspace initiative that would have a makerspace in every city and town that could, where there would be machine tools and technology available, and interested people to guide those who wanted to be guided, and leave those alone who wanted to be left alone to do their own thing. But to me, the key is multiplicity of ways, that if those who want to go to university have that available, those who want to go elsewhere have other things available. And then even if they don't have that stimulation of early childhood education in the home, they still can find it if they reach out and it's there.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Patrick, what title do you want for yourself?
I don't know. Give me one.
King of the universe. Okay. You're king of the universe. You look down upon the puny planet Earth and you say, here's what you need to do to educate your children.
I tell you, I don't have any better answers than Nick, especially. So I'd have to first start by hiring him as my political advisor. So, and since King James has the title of teacher already, I'd probably seek his tutelage. And but no, seriously though, the Nick's idea is about the public libraries and being readily available to the public, the institutions that are the free education, so to speak, being available is a good start. And I think there was a bold idea that Carnegie had in order to try to further the education of even the poorest by giving them a place to go to at least pick up a book or something to that effect, But I really don't have any better ideas. I think Nick really hit everything on the head.
Yeah, okay. I just want to point out that I am the grandson of a man who was pulled out of school after third grade, and yet was still in many ways a highly educated person. When he died, he left us a very large library of books that he had read, and not all in English, some in French, and he was considered by the people in his area to be the leading historian of that area. He had read an enormous quantity of stuff, in addition to being a successful farmer and merchant. And so this is a man I have great admiration for, my late grandfather, Arthur Adkins Carr. And he, as I said, was born in the 19th century and did not have a formal education to avail himself of, but he learned enough to read, and that was all he needed. He could read books, and he started reading books, and he never stopped reading books. And that's my recommendation to everybody. No matter who you are, if you can read a book, get a book and read it, and then get the next book that goes beyond that. And that's what traditionally what all education has been. And rubbing elbows with people who are at least as smart as you, if not smarter. And, and walking around and talking about things. And I think that we're going to have to really, really rethink the whole process. It's not just about getting your kids good jobs. It's not just about getting into the right schools, and it's about having a life that has meaning and fulfilling for you. That's what it's about. And you have to, the hard point is you have to make these decisions when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. So I think we parents should really be concerned about preparing our children, not so much for graduate school or being clever, but just making intelligent decisions when they're in their late teens. So that's pretty much, I should stop ranting now. And I'm going to go around one more time, and I'm going to let each of you either make a recommendation or a final comment. We need to get our recommendations back together for this podcast, but and we're going to start doing that on a regular basis. But I will start back with James.
Okay, I don't have a recommendation. I had a few, I think, last time, and I forgot them. My final comment would be, on top of what you were saying about read, ask questions. That's always a good way to learn more. Just simply ask questions.
Yeah. Okay. And Nick. Did we lose
Nick? You're muted.
No, he's still muted.
Okay. Unmute, please.
Sorry
Nick.
about that. I thought I was unmuted. In preparation for this episode, I was rewatching some videos on YouTube that I really enjoyed, and I'll send you a link of a clip with an interview with Peter Thiel, in which he talked very humorously about the problems of education and how he was trying to figure out what education really means to people today. And let me see, the title of the video is kind of campy here, but it says, Peter Thiel educates college professor who asks, what's your problem with higher education? But it's a good discussion, and I've watched other videos with Thiel in which he's made very similar points. So this is something I was going to bring up in the course of the discussion, but we've already been going on about this for a while, so we don't want to open up.
Yeah, Peter Thiel's this
he
right?
along with Elon Musk, he started PayPal, and then I can't remember what he got into after PayPal, but he made even more money. He's got more billions than most people in the Silicon Valley, and now he's primarily a venture capitalist.
What? He has more billions than I do?
Many more billions than you or I or everyone on this show, or who's ever listened to this show combined, has less money than Peter Thiel has.
Pretty safe bet, yeah. we only attract
the low rent crowd, yes, listeners. The low rent science crowd.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to make one final recommendation, which is the relatively recent book by Darren Brown called Happy. And Darren Brown's probably best known as a magician, but I have this sneaking feeling often that magicians are actually the smartest people in the world because they can fool the rest of us. And that's probably not true. They were just really, really good at being sneaky and deceptive. But they are, Darren Brown is definitely one of the smartest people in the world. He's this British magician who has made a career out of these seemingly impossible illusions and mentalism of the highest order, way, way beyond your usual cold reading. And he's got a lot of stuff out on YouTube if you want to look him up. He's done some really amazing stuff. But he wrote a book called Happy, which has no deception in it at all. And if you pick up the book in a bookstore, it looks like the usual bullshit self-help book. It says happy on the cover and the bright colors. But it's actually, Darren goes very deeply into the subject of happiness and how to achieve it without any bullshit at all. And in fact, he's very, very derisive of the self-help industry. And kind of like Richard Wiseman, who is also a magician and a psychologist who has written a book called 59 Seconds, which talks about self-help. But this book is not really about self-help. It's not about specific actions to make yourself happy. It's more about what happiness is and what happiness isn't. And that, to me, that's the most important thing, is all the stuff we do to try to make ourselves happy that is just completely hopeless and won't work. And he talks about, he goes deep into the ancient philosophers and the Stoics. And there's been a lot of books about Stoics lately, especially Massimo Pellucci's book about how to be a Stoic. There's quite a few others out there. And Darren is clearly very well read in this whole subject. And he talks about what Stoics would have had us do to try to be happy, which is, if you think a Stoic is somebody just tough and immune to suffering, that is not really a correct view of what Stoicism is. And he explains that and goes on to explain, not to give you dogmas about do this and you'll be happy, but rather here's some tools that you can use to try to find what makes you happy and to do it. And he even goes into the end of life, what will happen when you die and how you can have a good death versus a sorry, sad death. And so I highly recommend this book by Darren Brown. It's called Happy, and pick it up where you can and read it. It's an easy book to read. Okay. I think that's it. This has been episode 83 of the Unseen Podcast, and we would like to hear from you. You can contact us using email at unseenpodcast@gmail.com. You can comment directly on the blog at unseenpodcast.com, or you can come to our G+ community. We no longer have a subreddit, but if you want to talk to us, communicate with us, there's lots of ways to do it. You can even watch these shows live and ask questions or comments live during the show on YouTube. So, and also we're on Twitter at Podcast Unseen. Feel free to follow us there. We follow back anybody who's not a obvious spammer or, well, you know what I mean, right? Someone who's not a real problem person. We'll follow you back. So by all means, let's hear from you. And you can even anyone could be on a panel for the Unseen Podcast. You don't have to be as clever as Patrick. You just have to have burning questions about any topic, whatever. And we can talk about anything you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be just astronomy every week. It can be something else. And we're generally on every 2 weeks. So go to unseenpodcast.com. All the information is there about how to join the panel and become part of the show. And we'd love to have more panelists. New panelists are great. And we'd like to have panelists who are not in the United States. We'd love to have panelists who are not male and or white, as most of us are. Anybody who wants to be a panelist can be a panelist, and we will respect your views, and we will treat you with courtesy and kindness and let you talk and say what you want to say, even if we don't agree with it, which I can tell you right now we don't. But all right, so that's it. It's episode 83, the Unseen Podcast. It's the 10th of November, 2017. We'll be back in December. This is our last episode for November. We'll be back on December 8th. That's our last episode of 2017. So, because we're taking breaks for Thanksgiving and holiday here in the U.S. And I will hope to hear from you, and we'll see you next time. The topic is wide open, so please come over to our community and weigh in on what you'd like the topic to be. And we'll see you then. And good night.